My name is Nick Georgiev, and I'm Antelope Audio's UK ambassador. And along that job, I do quite a few other things. I'm the recording engineer myself, mixing engineer. I've done a few masters because friends asked me to, but I'm not a mastering engineer. And I'm also a lecturer in audio music production and sound engineering. I've been doing this for the past 9 years, and I actually like it. To a surprise to probably many of you here. I find that this one is a wonderful job, and I also do some. I was the Audio Engineering Society's, the UK Audio Engineering Society chairman in 2015 for the UK. And actually, are there any students here? Maybe I can do a quick plug. There is a very interesting event, upcoming event that the AES organizes, and it's for student members. That's going to take place in Glasgow, I think, or it's in Scotland for sure. You should check the Audio Engineering Society's website. I've sort of started this event back in the day. It's good fun. It's lots of lectures and workshops. And then I also work with another company where I develop plugins that are based on convolution. And I'm here tonight to talk about Antelope Audio. So I'm going to skip this slide as quickly as I can and move to talk about what we're here to hear today. So my idea about this is that, I guess you've heard of Antelope Audio, and you essentially, you may not need me to say a lot about it, but my idea is to present the company briefly and then talk mostly about the latest devices that we have. And I'm going to try to, make it more interesting and not just give you a sales pitch, but rather, just diving into some engineering topics and, maybe some geekier things that maybe you would like to know and not like to know about. And just to break the ice, I'm gonna play some audio examples, which I think are very important. So you can actually, I can say a lot of things about how the products are good and how these microphones that we're going to test today are just excellent mics. But you obviously don't have to take my word for that. And unless you hear samples, there's no way for me to convince you that they're actually good. So I'm gonna play some samples today. And at the end of all of these, we've got a lovely duo who is going to play for us live here. And what we're going to do, we're going to record it with these microphones here. And then we're going to move to the room next door, because it's a much better listening environment. Obviously, this is the live room of the student. The control room is over there. We have big speakers. So, as I said, I'm representing Antelope Audio here today. This is Mr. Igor Levin. You might have seen him. He is the founder and the CTO of the company. And as you will see, actually, there's something good about the fact that the main person of a company is actually an engineer, and very serious engineer, programmer and electrical engineer. So that drives a lot the R&D department of the company, and it's actually one of the biggest R&D departments of similar companies. At some point, we had about 40 people that were doing just R&D. And I'm not talking about manufacturing, I'm not talking about marketing, sales, none of that. I'm talking about R&D, just research and development. So it's not a surprise that there's a lot of new products coming out all the time. And these interfaces that we're going to use today, so we're going to use two interfaces for today. This is the Orion Studio Synergy Core, which came out, well, I got mine yesterday, yeah. So you get the idea, it's brand new. And then the Goliath HD, I'll show you that one. That's a really big interface with 16 mic pre's and actually 32 inputs and 32 outputs in a 2-unit rack. So this guy sounds fantastic, actually. I'm very critical about converters and preamps, but it does sound excellent. Has Class A mic pre's. And so the idea is that for the presentation today, and just to show you some of the features of the interface, I'm going to use the Orion Studio that is here. And then for the recording, we're going to use the Goliath, which is over there in the other room. And all the mics are already connected to the Goliath over there. Yeah. as I said, Igor founded the company, and he's currently the CTO. But he started about 25 years ago with a company he found in in the US. Aardvark. If there's any more senior people here, you might have heard of his clocks. So essentially, well, let's start with this. I guess everybody knows the importance of an audio clock, in digital audio. We know that anything digital needs something that makes tick-tock, tick-tock, right? It needs to count time, because when we're, say, selecting 41 kilohertz and 96 kilohertz sample rate, it means you're going to have to record, let's say, 96,000 samples within 1 second. And in order to record them at equal intervals, you need something that actually counts the time and says, well, let's divide this 1 second at 96,000 equal intervals and take a sample of the incoming voltage at every given point in time. But the thing is that if the clock drifts and it moves up and down and it's not stable, then actually you may run into trouble that the samples are not taken at the correct time, and that can lead to a type of distortion known as jitter. So you might have heard about that. And so he actually started, I think initially he didn't want to run an audio company. He was into video and films, and so he had a personal need to sort out some syncing issues, and he created a clock himself for his video setup. And then he just gave the clock around. I don't know exactly the story, but I know that at some point lots of people wanted to buy that clock. And that's how his company, the first company, started. And then in 2005, he created Antelope Audio in Bulgaria, which I didn't know, and I'm Bulgarian. So there you go. I thought that actually the company is entirely based in California, but in fact, as you will see in a moment, the headquarters are in Sofia. And this is where most of the staff is, currently about 120 people, I think, or more than 120 people. So his first products were clocks, actually. But as you will see, the company at the moment manufactures all kinds of different products. It's not clocks only. As you see here, we do all kinds of interfaces. They're mostly large size interfaces. So there is one which is called the Discrete 4, which has 4 mic pre's, and that's like the smallest of interfaces at the moment. But like the bigger stuff, like the Orion 32, which you might know, has 32 inputs and 30 outputs. So they're slightly larger scale. We're not talking about like tiny little interfaces like that. And we also develop mic pre's. So we have separate mic pre modules. For instance, we have a 2-unit rack with 32 mic pre's in that. And it's Class A mic pre's again, so it's a very, very good solution for anyone that may need that many inputs. And we also develop plugins which currently are used within the interface. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. They run entirely on both Fpga and DSP chips that are built into the interfaces. And we also, as you can see, develop microphones. And this is something new for the company. I'll be absolutely honest with you, when I heard about Antelope Audio making microphones, I was quite skeptical. I was unsure whether they're going to sound good, because it's the first microphone that the company manufactures. And then you think, how's that going to sound like? And I hope that I'm going to convince you that they sound quite good, actually excellent. And also we do some mastering grade converters, like 2-channel, so let's say 4 out, 2 in, like the Pure 2 converter, and also monitor controllers. So all kinds of gear related to sort of, I would say, gear that is aimed to sound high-end and very pristine, very clean, high definition, low distortion, quite transparent gear. Yeah. So that's briefly about the company. Yes, a lot of the products are actually handcrafted. Well, I'd say everything is assembled and made, and obviously not all the components. Some components are just purchased, but the whole assembly is made in Bulgaria, and it's handcrafted. Then there is this thing that the company is well known for managing to pack as many features within a small physical space. So within one unit, I think it was the Orion 32, the first version of the Orion 32 that came out a few years ago. I think 2013, that was the first one-unit interface with 32 inputs and 32 outputs. Yeah, which is quite a lot if you think about it, within like this size to pack, 32 I/O. It's not an easy task. There's also this thing that, as I said, the R&D is like really driven, and so as you would probably know, there are theoretical limits to the dynamic range that you can achieve within a specific electronic equipment, just simply because there's noise from the electrons, and so there would be with microphones noise because of the air molecules. And essentially with some of the interfaces, they've reached the theoretical maximum of dynamic range. Currently there is the Amari interface, which is a mastering grade 2-in 2-out audio file converter that I think goes up to 138 dB of dynamic range on the output. Not on the input, you can't do it on the input, but on the output you can do that. And yeah, so there's lots of interesting things about it. That's on the left is the main building of Antelope in Bulgaria, where lots of, pretty much everything happens there. As you can see, we have essentially everything there. There's like a bunch of awards that the company has won. I'm not going to bother you too much with that. And this is just a brief history of the company, just some key events. As you can see, in the beginning, the company starts with manufacturing clocks. And as I said, Igor started by making his own clock just to solve some personal issues, and that grew into a big business. And then at some point he thought, well, how can I have a good product out there? How can I make it even better? And so one of the things that he realized is that the crystal oscillator that generates, the tick-tock thing, that would, its behavior will vary with the physical conditions. So if the temperature changes within the room or in the interface, it goes lower or higher, the clock would start drifting. And so he thought, well, what if I actually put that clock inside a little oven and heat it up to an exact temperature and keep it always at this temperature no matter what. So that's why you would see at the front panel or inside the control panel of the interfaces, the clock is actually labeled as oven, right? Because there is actually a transistor that heats it up. And in 2017 he released this isochron 10M clock, which actually rather than using crystal oscillator uses one that is made of rubidium. So that's quite an expensive device that actually just brings the jitter to like ridiculously low amounts. And of course there is not only the stable clock. Most manufacturers do that. You've got also a software part that is working inside here, inside the interface. It's called the jitter management system, and that further improves the stability of the system. So it started mostly it started as a clock company really, and then as you can see there's the first interface released in 2011, and then the Orion 32, which I mentioned already, the 1-unit 32 I/O interface, came out in 2013, which was quite a thing, like, oh, what's going on here? And then a monitor controller followed, and if we sort of move further, you will see the first huge interface, the Goliath. This is the first version. What we're going to use today is the third version, generation 3 of the interface. So every next version essentially is driven by the R&D department, which says, well, we can actually do this better. So let's release a new version. And so it happens. And just to fast forward a little bit, in 2017, the company released the first modeling mics. And actually I apologize, I understand that the name of one of the mics, it's a little bit of a funny one in French, but I'm just going to have to pronounce it the way it's pronounced. It's the Verge microphone. So as well as the discrete interface, which is called discrete because it has discrete mic pre's. So as in, it's not surface mount, integrated circuits, but rather it's a discrete circuit, which was, all the components were picked and specifically, composed the pre in that kind of way. And then in 2018, we essentially launched a few more products, which you're going to check here. You can see them here. And so it's these guys, the Edge Duo, which is a dual output microphone. And I'll explain in a second, well, a little bit later, why this is a dual output. It means it comes out of an XLR that is a 5-pin XLR. And you can see here that actually, it comes to a Y breakout cable to 3 XLR. So 2 3-pin XLRs. So you need 2 mic pre's to use that microphone, but it allows you to vary the polar pattern in the mix. And so it does the Quadro over there, which is this mic here, which actually is very similar to the Duo, but it's essentially just 2 mics on top of each other. And you can spin this one. I don't know if you can see that here, but see if I shouldn't have done this. Maybe my colleagues will have to check the setting later on if it's, but you can actually endlessly spin the top capsule, and that's how it is assembled. And it's not going to, you're not going to unscrew it or something like that, right? Which is quite cool, because when you're doing stereo recording, you can actually listen. You don't have to switch the phantom power off. It's not going to make a click or anything like that. You could just literally spin the top capsule and adjust the angle while you're listening to the sound. So that's quite convenient, and it just allows you to hear it. No. Okay, that's fine. And adjust the stereo width of your recording. Yeah, and that's essentially the last range of products. So we're going to use this guy here, the Goliath HD Gen 3, and also the the next one that I'm going to show you, which is this guy here. So these are the latest products. There is a very interesting mic over there. I'm going to talk a little bit more about it a little bit later, which is very similar to these ones there, the Edge Duo, but rather than a 5-pin XLR, it has a Usbc output. And it's actually an entire, if you wish, studio within a microphone, because you can just connect it with a USB-C cable to your laptop. It has a headphone out built into the mic. And so you can just connect the mic to your laptop, connect the headphones to the mic, and you're ready to go. You have the mic pre inside, you have the converter inside, and you even have Fpga effects. So you can load a compressor, an EQ, a de-esser, a reverb, and you could just record something on the go, and that's why it's called Edge Go, right? And the new Orion, so this is the latest generation, just some new features and mostly really nice converters, updated converters with huge dynamic range and very, very new converter chips. And yeah, the Amari, which I mentioned, with the crazy dynamic range, the theoretical dynamic range, basically. So this is the guy that I'm going to use today. Now, you're seeing here the front panel, but if you look at the back, you're going to see that it actually comes with 12 mic pre's, and they're all Class A mic pre's. So we have the 4 on the front, and these are combo inputs. So as you can see, they're XLR inputs, but you can also plug a TRS into them. Essentially, the front, actually, the front 4, they have actually hi-hat option for like guitars, bass guitars, stuff like that, instrument inputs essentially. And it comes with 2 headphone outs and 2 reamper outs on the front. So the 2 headphone outs, I don't think there's much to explain about that other than they sound great, but you're welcome to come and have a listen through my headphones here after the event. I can tell you that they're great, but unless you hear them. But the reamper outs are actually quite cool. A very interesting feature, because it's common maybe if there's some bassists or guitarists here, you could actually record your guitar at home with a DI, and then do all your edits, and then at some point just go to the studio and connect that to some real amplifiers, and just essentially play the edited version of your audio and not waste time, in the studio. Maybe the studio is really expensive to hire it. You want to go into a good studio with a good room like this one, and just not waste time when you're in a place like that. So these ones allow you to just run your signal out of them into a guitar amplifier. And does anyone here know what's the difference between, why would you want to have a dedicated output to connect to a guitar amplifier? Is there anything specific any specific why we don't use the line output?
The same input impedance?
Correct. It's different impedance. It's a very different impedance. Different output impedance.
Voltage as well?
Very different output voltage, much higher voltage. So, let's just say that these are much, like the line outputs would be much lower impedance than what a guitar amplifier is expecting to see. The guitar amplifier is expecting to see a very different impedance, an unbalanced signal, and much lower voltage. And so, yes, you can do it with a normal line output and just plug it into your guitar amplifier, and it will work. But the problem is you're going to have to keep the level all the way down and very gently bring it up until you get the right level, because otherwise it will be so loud because it's sending so much voltage and it's receiving all the voltage. It's just crazy. It's going to be so loud. And it arguably won't sound as a guitar going into an amplifier, but it will sound like a line output going into a guitar amplifier. Right? So that's one reason why you want to have them there. And another really good thing about this is that they have transformers on the output. And a transformer can save you a lot of, you can avoid a lot of trouble when you have a transformer there, because we know that, when we have different devices plugged into different main sockets around, you can get easily some ground loops. And by having a transformer there, that's a really good feature that, can prevent you from having this trouble. And yeah, the interface is also called Synergy Core for a reason. So it does have the typical for the company Fpga chips inside, and I'll talk a little bit about this later. I'll explain what's that about. But it's not a typical DSP. It has some advantages over DSP, but it's a very different type of approach to modeling analog gear, EQs, compressors, and things like that. But it does also have 6 DSP chips, and this is something new for the company. And this is something that it's present in this interface, and also the discrete 4 and discrete 8 Synergy Core. And these chips will now allow us, I cannot tell you brands at the moment because we're just waiting to release the first partnerships. But the idea is that you will be able to run third-party plugins on the DSP that is built into the interface. And that's really good because you not only have the FPGA chips with the Antelope plugins running onto it, but you also have the DSP chips on which you can run third-party plugins. And that's particularly useful while you're tracking, because if you're recording somebody and you want to, that person, let's say a singer, you want to add a little bit of EQ, a bit of compression, maybe a bit of reverb, but you want to keep the latency at minimum. Yeah, this thing will really help you for that. And in fact, with the FPGA chips, you can, achieve ridiculously low, like from what I know, under a millisecond latency without even going to a DAW. You can just get the inputs of the interface. You will see, I'll show you in a second, there is a sub-mixer, in fact 4 mixers built into the control panel, where you can create a headphone mix for your musicians and then send that to the headphones. And you don't even need to switch on Pro Tools or Ableton or whatever it is that you're using to record, right? So that's quite useful. And there's actually 50 effects included with that interface already. I'll show you a bunch of these. And yes, it does have Thunderbolt and USB, so that's pretty cool. Gives you lots of flexibility. And then at the back, as I said, you have another 8 XLR inputs, and then you have a D-sub, 2 D-subs with 16 line outputs, right? So in fact, you could use one of these interfaces to plug 12 mics in, and then connect that to a 16-channel summing mixer, and then you have a dedicated it's called Monitor out, and there's actually two of them, monitor A and monitor B. And these are just two outputs, stereo outputs on TRSs. And the idea there is that they actually have even greater dynamic range. They're slightly optimized when it comes to sound quality. I mean, I don't know if you'll be able to hear a difference between the line outs and the monitor out, but strictly speaking, when you measure it, you can actually measure a difference. Yeah. And so the idea there is that you can connect your speakers to those two monitor outs. And the cool thing about this one is that you can send different sources or the same source to the monitor outs, and you can choose whether you want to listen to them at the same time or you switch between A and B. So I think it's quite flexible as an interface. I think I spoke a little bit about that already, you know, the clock, the Class A mic pre's, the Fpga effects, all of that. So yes, and there's actually, like for a lot of the devices, there's actually the option to control them over network. Or, for instance, there is this monitor controller called Satori, and that one you can control from an app, you know, from something you can install on your Mac or Windows or whatever you're using, and you know you can actually, I don't know, sit at the back of the room and control the volume or something like that. So there's lots of, as I said, lots of features packed in these guys. The whole idea of Synergy Core is this thing that they coexist, both the DSP and the FPGA chips, and work together. So let's move ahead a little bit. This is an example of actually some of the, well, these are the first Synergy Core, so first DSP-based plugins that Antelope launched just, I think, a couple of weeks ago or so. There will be third-party plugins as well. But again, I wish I could tell you because there's some cool collaborations that fortunately I cannot disclose at this point. Maybe as well, wait, don't. There's someone internal here. I mean, he used to be my student back in the day, so you might know a few things. But and so, okay, maybe before jumping into the microphones, I can actually show you a bit of the interface, and I can play you something. In fact, here's what we're going to do. I'm just going to play you quickly a track which we recorded at the Strong Room Studios in London. I don't know if you heard of the Strong Room. It's a really cool studio. I think like the Prodigy was recorded there, and well, Spice Girls. Not a big fan. And so I'm going to play you a mix that we did essentially with the producer Cameron Craig. I don't know if you heard of him. And maybe I can quickly show you a picture or two, just so you get an idea. But recording was that we use only only Antelope mics and Antelope converters. Yeah, so lots of. Wait, I'm going to show you that. So essentially, everything was mic'd with this, apart from this, you know, Beta 52, which, you know, Cameron insisted on having it there. And let's just check this out. So I'm going to play it out of the Orion so you can hear it, and you can actually hear how a finished production can sound like that was made with these mics. Yeah. So it's kind of, let's hear the converter, let's hear the mics. So just for the guys that are doing the live stream, I'm going to change. Yeah, cool, thanks. Let's have a listen.
today.
To give credit to the band, Michael, thank you. So just to give credit to the band is called Little Thief, and the label that represents the band is called Funnel Music. I'm obliged to do it, and they were really kind to allow me to play the track today. And I think, I personally, I was really happy when we got the tracks and, and we just heard the results. And for instance, the toms here don't have any processing. They're just as they were recorded. We had the small verges on them. Okay, so let's see what happens here. How does the control panel of the Orion look like? Just to give you an idea of what you can do with the software that it's built into it. So it welcomes you with something that might look a little bit scary at a first glance, but it really isn't that scary. Once you understand how it works, I think it's probably one of the most functional and intuitive, at least for me. Okay, I'm a geek, so maybe for me, difficult is easy, but for me, actually, it really gives me so much possibilities and so much routing possibilities and other functions that I'm really happy with it. So right here on the top, as you can see, we have gain for all the 12 mic pre's, and I could, for instance, link them together if I want to, control them as a stereo pair, phantom power, phase inversion. Yeah, and I can actually select the type of input that I'd like. So these are the front inputs. As I said, they have also the high-Z option. But here is an interesting thing, and the Orion Synergy Core is the first of interfaces that actually has this function from the Antelope range. So other than the mic and the line, we have this option which is called Direct. Now, here's the thing. I don't know how many of you have done audio engineering degrees, or they've dug into some block schematics of consoles or other gear, but essentially the mic and the line input can share some similar parts of the front end of the interface. So you may select line input, but you would still be going through some of the circuitry of the mic pre. Yeah, that's very common for, in fact, actually some cheap consoles. You'd see that actually they just pad the signal, and then just still use the mic pre, but that's not a good practice. But even actually with well-made designs, you could have some parts of the circuitry that are shared between the mic and the line input. Now, as I said, part of the big thing about the philosophy of the company is that it creates interfaces that sound as transparent as possible. Yeah, they sound clean. Because when you record it, clean, but that doesn't mean like nasty sounding, harsh or something. It just means clean and natural. Then you can color it as you wish after that. You're not constrained to the color of what you're using. Sometimes we love a bit of color, like who doesn't like a really old vintage, tube pre that you can distort and all of that. But that's not the idea here. Now, the direct option, what it does, it completely bypasses that front end and injects the line level signal straight into the converter, bypassing as much as possible of the electronics. So the amount of stuff that stays between the input and the converter is completely minimized to almost nothing. So what that guarantees is a very, very, very clean input. And we've allowed you to actually pick which one you'd prefer. The classic input or the extremely clean one, which has even lower noise and harmonic distortion figures. Yeah, it's very clean. Then, if you actually look right here, there's a little microphone icon. So if I click that thing, comes up this plugin, and here you can see the 4 mic models that I introduced before. And so actually, if you're using some of the modeling mics, you can select from here the type of mic that you want to use, and if I'm using the Verge, I can say, well, please behave as this or that microphone, right here at the very input. And as you will see in a bit, there is actually the option to record the signal through that plugin with the processing and send it to your DAW with the processing, yeah? Or record it without the processing. or record it with and without the processing on separate tracks in your DAW. And you also have the option to record it one or the other way, but send it to the headphones of the musician with the processing. So you see what I mean? You can record it pure as it is, but then send it to the musician with the sound of a dynamic mic. Yeah? And you know, it just gives you all of that flexibility. And actually that plugin, it's built into the interface. It runs on the Fpga chips that are built inside, so it doesn't introduce any additional latency, it doesn't tax your CPU. But you also have native plugins which you would need an iLok if you want to use. But you know, the mics come with an iLok code that you can claim and register it on your iLok. And then essentially what you can do is you can have the same plugin also inside Pro Tools, Logic, Ableton, whatever. It supports VST, AU, and you know, and AX. So you've got all of it. You can either do it from the control panel of the interface, or you can do it later on in the mix within your DAW project. Yeah, and you know, there's you can actually have different models, and you've got this thing where you can vary the polar pattern of the recording, and I'll get to this in a bit. Yeah, so that's built into the interface. It's really good for low latency monitoring and recording through it. Now there's a bunch of other features here on the top. So to be honest, I'm not going to bother you with the ADAT and the SPDIF inputs. So there's ADAT and SPDIF inputs at the back. Standard digital inputs, you know, there's nothing specifically crazy about that. But here you've got levels for monitor A and monitor B. And to control them from here, or I could essentially choose which one of the two I control from the front panel and just do it with, you know, with the knob here, and you can see it obviously updates it there. And same thing goes actually for the headphone outs. They're a little bit to the right there, and you know, I can do that from here as well. And I can also mute the headphones and all that by pressing the front volume control. So you've got mute and volume for any of your main outputs here. In fact, you could even do things such as control the mic pregame from here, but I don't think you'll be able to see this or anyone, you know, because this is currently live streamed. I think I forgot to say that, to mention this. So I'm not going to show you much of that here, but yes, you can do it. Then you've got things like talkback, which is really cool. So if I press this, I can actually, and I have also talkback button here at the front. There's a built-in mic in the interface. So that actually really helps for communication with an artist. And you can, you know, route the talkback to say headphones 1, headphones 2, monitor A, monitor B, things like that. So you have the flexibility to do this, as you see in a bit with the routing matrix here, the colorful thing that you see in the control panel. You've got things like sample rate and things like that, but I'm not going to bother you with that because that's not so interesting. Right here, I want to show you something. So there's this little gearbox, gear button that brings up a bunch of cool options where you can set your maximum output levels. And for the Goliath, I believe it was 26 dBu. I need to double check that, but it has a higher voltage output. But there is something really interesting that we have here. And this thing is the DC coupled inputs option. So you can actually switch that on and off. Now, I don't know if you know what's the idea about that, but most gear would have built-in high-pass filters. In fact, every microphone will have a built-in high-pass filter at a very low frequency, and so would have you know, all kinds of interfaces. And that's there to remove any DC signals, yeah? You just get rid of that stuff. But now, here's the thing. I'll show you in a second that you can control, where you can send any kind of input, so like your line inputs or mic pre inputs, to any output here. You know, for instance, let's say I wanted to send these two inputs to line outputs 15 and 16. I'll just drag and drop that, and now these two are actually going here. So if I select them, you see how these boxes are lit up. So I'll explain a little bit in more detail the routing, but the idea is that you can actually send any input to any output, and you could say, well, I want input 1 to go to outputs 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Yeah, and what that means is that you can actually use the interface as a router, as a hub. And because you can switch it to DC coupled inputs and outputs, that means that you could actually send DC signals through it as a hub and not filter that stuff. And the cool thing about this, can anyone think of a reason why you may want to be sending DC signals? Because you know, audio signals like music is represented as AC voltage, right? Am I talking too geeky here? Can you follow? Can you follow that? You know, AC. You know, electricity, voltage, current. They can have like, AC would be alternating current, where you know, like the electrons are jiggling back and forth, right? And they're sort of like doing something very similar to what the air particles. Well, not quite the same, but you know. And so actually, when you have AC current and voltage, that's how you represent the audio waveform, which can have a positive and a negative phase, right? And so obviously you can't do that with DC. But what is it that you can do with DC? What kind of signal you can send with DC? Any clues? Well, how about synths and control voltage? CV. Anyone using Eurorax here? Any analog synth maniacs? Yeah. Oh, that's like, man, if you have if you have like 10 analog synths right now, you'll be like, oh, this is so cool. I can actually control them, and I can have these boxes going through this, you know, router and send it to these other boxes, and you know, it's actually very, very useful for people who are into synthesis and specifically analog synths. You know, we can use MIDI, but a lot of people use, you know, CV at the moment. Yeah. So that's a little touch in there. What else do we have here? So let's look at the bottom panel. Now here I've got the routing matrix, and there's a bunch of other things that I'm going to go into, like meters. The effects are here, the mixers are here, and this is the routing matrix. Now this is one thing that I want to show you. Yeah, I'm going to be brief on that, but I just want to show you how powerful it is. So you see here it says from, and then below it says to, right? So a lot of people like to think about these as inputs and outputs, but I don't like to think about it this way. I like to think about it as sources and destinations. And so for instance, the very top is your mic pre's, and you can see my 12 mic pre's are there. Okay, cool. Now, I may want to record these 12 mic pre's into, say, Pro Tools. Now, in order to do this, I need to tell my interface, send these to the 12 inputs in Pro Tools, inputs 1 to 12, for instance. And without doing this, it may not work, right? The default preset will be set that way anyway, but you can change it. And so if I want to do this, can you see down here, it says comp rec, so computer record. These are the actual inputs in your DAW. Yeah, so if I select them by holding the shift as they are currently selected, so let me just do it again. So if I hold shift and I select all of them, and then I send these to my comp rec, now the 12 mic pre's are going to inputs. I want to send them also to inputs, you know, 13 to 24, and I can actually do that. And I can even send input 1 to all the inputs in Pro Tools, which probably isn't the best thing to do, but I could do that, right? Now, the outputs of Pro Tools are your comp play, so computer playback, yeah? And so then these ones, you see these 24 guys, well, what do I do with them? Well, where would I want to send them? Well, maybe I want to send them to my line outputs. That's what you usually want to do, right? And so then you just drag and drop them here, and then they go to your line outputs. And if the numbers are a bit confusing, you can just double click here, and maybe I can label these as P1, P2, P3, and you know, so forth, P4. So now actually, you know, I know preamp 1, preamp 2, preamp 3, yeah? And you know, you can come up with your own name. Now, have a look at this. So pre's 5 to 12, currently going to comp rec 5 to 12. So they will just go into inputs 5 to 12 in Pro Tools or Logic or whatever. But right below, I also have EMU mic 5 to 12. Well, that's the mic emulation plugins. Now, 1 to 4 don't have it because they have the high Z input. And for some reason, I don't know what's the technical limitation there, but they couldn't install the emulation plugins for the first 4 inputs. But the preamps 5 to 12 go into these plugins. And you can see here there's a microphone icon on these ones, but not on the first 4. And so the idea is this. I can send the preamp signal into Pro Tools. Like, let's say, for example, I have a mic connected to input 5 and 6. And that goes to Pro Tools inputs 5 and 6. But then that 5 and 6 goes also into emulation 5 and 6. And then I can take these ones and send them to, let's say, Pro Tools input 7 and 8. And so now, if I create 2 tracks in Pro Tools, one with input 5 and 6, the other one with 7, I can record actually the processed and the unprocessed signals at the same time. Does it make sense? Yeah? So it's quite useful. Then you've got your ADAT, blah, 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 SPDIF. Let's not spend too much time on that. Now, this stuff here, it's interesting, though. AFX out and the 4 mixers. So what are these ones? OK, let's start with the effects. Now, I have, actually, let me quickly, I'm going to quit that, and I'm going to load a session here just to play some audio. So we can actually process it, because the AFX is the built-in plugins. Yeah, so I just want to show you the plugins and how we can actually use the routine metric to send stuff to it. Actually, not this session. So that was the last one I used. Let me just open another one. This one. OK, so this is actually a really cool session. I really like that. We recorded this at another studio called the Frary. That's near London. So I'm just going to show you very quickly a few pictures of that. When we were, it's just essentially a really good drummer playing drum solo, yeah. And we just wanted to have something. Well, I was asked to do some kind of promo video, and I just wanted to have something to demonstrate how the modeling mice can sound like through the Goliath HD. Yeah, so exactly the same setup that we have today for our duo that is going to perform for us later. So I recorded this. Now this mix is done without any processing. Yeah. So the idea of the mix was, can we have something like drums that sound awesome without using a single EQ, without using a single compressor? Nothing. There's just nothing. The only things that I've used are time adjustment plugins. That is just manual time adjustment. So, the idea here is, well, maybe I have, like, such as these 2 mics here, right? So I have one here, and then I have these 2 that are further back. Now, because if I'm singing from here, this one will pick the sound first, and then this one will pick the sound. As soon as I sum them together, I may run into some trouble. They may cause comb filtering. Yeah, I don't know if you're aware of that. So you may start having some phasing issues. Now, if I could actually nudge this or that inside Pro Tools or whatever I'm using, Reaper in this case, and essentially just move the track, like I grab the audio and I just move it so that they're actually time aligned, maybe there's not going to be such problem anymore. Now, there is actually some automatic software that can do this for you, but I prefer doing it this way because what did I say in the beginning? I want to go away today and think listening is really important. And I have found that actually the automatic plugins, yeah, they find the best setting, which is the most in-phase setting, but that doesn't always sound the best. That's the funny part. It just doesn't always sound the best. So the way I actually do this, I set up the delay slider here. onto a fader, a controller, and then the way I would approach the mix, I would start with the most important signal. I play that, then I add the second one, which is the second mic that I think will contribute to the mix the most. And then I slightly vary the time between the two mics. And how is it that they combine? How is it that they work when you alter the time relationship and the phase relationship between the two? And at some point you just figure out that something that maybe isn't theoretically the best sound is working better for you, right? That's the funny part. So the only thing that is used for this actually mix is essentially just some time delays, but no EQ, no compression. So that was played by Jerry Brown, an awesome drummer, and as I said, recorded at Ferrari Studios. Let's have a listen to this. And so in order to hear it, what we're having here is that comp play 1 and 2, it's actually going to the speakers. Well, okay, it's a little bit more, okay, I'll get back to this because I had to do something a bit funny because we're streaming, so I had to send the second copy of the signal. So it's actually isn't going to the speakers. It's going first to the mixer and from the mixer to the speakers, but let's not, I'll get to that. Wait. You don't need to know this, sorry. Let's keep that little part. Just forget that I said that for now. Let's have a listen to this. Yeah, okay, so we've got like a decent sound, I think. Yeah, maybe I'll play something a little bit more traditional, just with a straight beat. Okay, yeah, I can see that the speakers are clipping a little bit, but it's a big room, they're not going to die, it's all right. I've done this many times with PMC speakers. So let's just say now that I wanted to process a little bit this audio, just add a little bit, I don't know, an EQ, a compressor, something like that. Well, it actually will be quite easy to do it. Let's see how we can do that. Let's just loop this part here. And come back here. Now, here's the output of Pro Tools, Reaper, sorry, 1 and 2. Now, that I am going to send to AFX in, right? This is the input to the effect track. Right, so I'm going to get the output of Reaper. I'm going to send it here to the effect rack. And then I'm going to go to the effects, which is this tab here. And then I'm going to pick my effect. Now, because I'm working in stereo, I'm going to link the two channels so that I actually don't have to set, the same settings for the left and the right channel. It's not cool. And I'm going to pick an effect. And actually, I'm going to zoom out a little bit just so I can show you. But I've got things like a de-esser, tape machine, just clear digital EQ, things like that, a gate, an expander. Then I have a tremolo, a flanger. Who doesn't like a flanger on drums? Everybody loves a flanger in drums. Zeppelin liked it, why not? And so maybe let's add something like, I really like this one. And so let's just add a bit of that. So this effect, you can use it for recording, you can use it for mixing. It runs entirely on the Fpga chip that is built inside, the device. And so, okay, who doesn't like 14K on drums? And who doesn't like 60 Hertz on drums? And maybe let's just bring a little bit the kick up. And what I really like about these kind of EQs is that you have the option of plus 2 dB, plus 4 dB, plus 6 dB. There's none of that, bullshit. Oh, am I going to go 0.8 or 0.9? Come on, let's just pick make a choice, and let's just commit to that. Yeah. So let's hear it. Let's hear the same mix with a bit of EQ. So bypass it. Now we can go crazy. Okay. I'll be honest with you. I thought I couldn't hear it when we did 2dB, and you should be able to hear it. Could anyone hear it? No, you couldn't, because we forgot to route the output of the effect. So we were actually not listening to the effect. But it's cool, because actually when you see it, sometimes you think that you're hearing it, right? And again, remember, you should listen, right? Okay, so I forgot, my bad. But okay, let's have a look at that. So I'm sending it there. I've set up the EQ. Now what I need to do is I need to get the output of the effect and send that to where I actually want it to be. I'll explain later why I'm not sending it to my speakers, but I'm sending it to mixer 4. I'll get to that in a second, but this time we should be able to hear it. I'm pretty sure. Let's have a listen to this again. And actually, I'm gonna go for the beat here, that it's pretty straightforward, just because I think it's easier to hear it there. Actually, I thought I like it with 2dB only, but yes. I forgot that I should actually give some cues to the guys that are doing the live streaming. They're laughing there. So, but I think this time you could hear the effect, right? Now, if we wanted, we could add something else. We could say, well, do you know what? Wouldn't it be nice to make it a little bit more vintage and just add a bit of distortion? Because who doesn't like some distortion? It's going to be very distorted, actually. So I'm going to play an example now, guys. If you can mute my mic. Okay, that was a bit of destruction. Probably not the right setting, but actually, if you go, if you change the impedance, so to speak, here, you can actually get a much cleaner sound. Let's try it this way. And what I'll do is actually let's chuck in a compressor as well, because why not? We have it. Which one? Maybe I can show you. Well, I don't know. Which one would you let's just go for a classic. Yeah. Okay, guys, I'm gonna play some audio again. Okay, as you can see, and I can keep stacking some of these, yeah. And you could use them also for tracking, and I can very quickly delete all of them if I don't like what it is that I'm doing, right? So that's just briefly in a nutshell how you could use the effects, and I'll just show you this one. This is oh, you can put a guitar cabinet if you want on the drums, why not? This one is actually based not on Fpga, but rather is based on DSP. Perhaps it might be a good idea to talk about this in a second, but let me just finish with this, and I'm pretty much done with what I want to show you about the interface, yeah? There's only one thing that I want to show you. Well, obviously you have things such as preset management, so you can actually store and load a preset as a file, but you can also just command click on one of these 5 presets, and now I've stored the current setting is preset 1, and then it's just a matter of clicking on that and recalling it. And then there is this thing, I'm not going to dive in too much into that, but there is this matrix here, and this is the thing that scares a lot of people. I have to admit, like, if you don't know what you're doing, you can create a lot of trouble by messing with this. What's the time? I think my colleagues are probably telling me that I've been talking for a while. And okay, so we've got the matrix here, and it's a very powerful tool. It's very similar to the other routine matrix, but here you can actually dig in even deeper, and you can actually change all kinds of assignments of line inputs and outputs. It's very powerful. I can expand that, and as you can see now, I see that preamp 1 goes into line out 15 and 16 and things like that. So I can actually swap things around here, create new connections and so on. It can be very, very powerful. I think it's probably going to be a bit too much if I dive into that now too deep. And the last thing that I really want to show you, because it's really cool, it's the mixer here. Now, I have actually not 1 but 4 mixers, right? And if I go to the first one, you see there's something else here. There's a reverb unit on the top. So mixers 2, 3, and 4, they don't have the reverb there, yeah? But number 1 has it. And the idea is this: if I'm recording a musician, and let's say I want to have my mic emulation going into mixer 1, well, I can just drag and drop that here and send it to my mixer, and any kind of source that I want, maybe I want Pro Tools outputs 5 and 6 to also go to my mixer and so on. You know, I can select anything that I want to go to that mixer, then come here, actually mix it, and add some reverb with the send effect, with the send here, the aux send here, so to speak. And then everything in that mixer is summed into this master fader. And then that master fader actually comes here into the routing matrix, and this is the output which I can then send to my monitors or my headphone outputs or anything that I want. So this allows you to very quickly create a Q mix that is fully customized with reverb, with effects, with a very low latency. And the cool thing about it is that you can actually then run your DAW at very, very low buffer settings. They can go down to 64 or something like that samples, but then still have all the effects on, you know, on the headphones of the singer or whoever it is that you're working with. Yeah. So that's the bit that I wanted to show you here. I think, from what I understand, I have to be a bit quicker. And so, are there any questions actually before I continue? I mean, I've been talking, I think, for an hour and a half. How long is it that I've been talking for? It's about an hour. So it's not that long. No. Yeah. Oh, all right. Okay. So, do you have any questions before I just dive into the mics quickly, and then we can actually probably try these things?
Does the 1176 have a nuke mode as well?
Yes, it does. You have to hold the command button and then press the ratios.
All right.
It's yeah. You need to know. There's no like O button, so to speak. It's just like on the original, you don't have an O button. It's funny because like back in the day I had a student who asked me, where's the O button? I say, oh, no, you just press all the buttons. Yeah. Do you have any other questions? No? All right, so let's have a look at the mics. I think I already briefly covered these. I mean, the idea is that you've got like a whole selection of vintage mics and classic mics. They are, modern mics. I mean, this is the thing, like back in the day, it was actually quite expensive to build a good microphone. And today, surprisingly, there are more and more cheaper microphones that they don't sound so bad at all. And the price range of these things, especially the Verges, I mean, they're currently I think 150 euros for a mic. And I think you heard how they sound like on toms, right? Or actually, did you hear? I don't think you heard exactly how they sound on toms. I can just play you the toms only. Let's look at that section here and just solo the rack and the floor. No, that's just the way they record it. Yeah, that's really good for a mic at this price, I have to say. And that's actually without using any of the emulation. See, I mean, I have the plugin loaded here. Maybe I can show you this. So you have the plugin also in the DAW. So if I just click here, I can actually pick the type of mic that I want, and that would, change the sound significantly. Let's this one up. That's a crazy thing to do when you have mic that sounds so good to emulate something that sounds like this. But I think it's an interesting experiment. The low one's gone, right? But you can do some crazy things. Actually, not with these ones. I want to show you one mic just to kind of hopefully blow your mind. That's something that I think demonstrates exceptionally how much you can achieve with the polar patterns. So there is this mic, and I've been experimenting with these kind of setups for a while. Can you see what this thing is? So I'm not talking about the Verge here on the kick beater. I'm talking about this Edge Duo. Have you ever used a mic like that? I think I have a better. Let me just find the better. Yeah, this one. Here you can see actually the placement. What is going on? What am I doing here?
Something crazy, but it sounds great.
It sounds awesome. That's the mic around which I've built the whole mix. What is going on here? So it's dual output mic, yeah, 5-pin XLR. I can do all kinds of polar patterns with it, and as you can see, I can actually change it here, right, in the post-production. And I'm gonna do this in a second, and you're gonna hear the difference. It's huge. I think this is like one of the most beautiful examples of how much the polar pattern changes what you're doing, yeah, what you're getting out of a mic. Well, let's think about the position for a second. Like, imagine that this is my snare drum, right? And what do? I place the mic right in the middle like that. It's looking up and down. Now, if you set this to figure of 8, yeah, bidirectional polar pattern. Now, how does it work? An Omni mic, well, we all know, imagine this guy was Omni, and it just sits like this here. And if I imagine that these ports are not here, so this shows that it's a cardioid, right? But if it's like that, yeah, and its diaphragm is exposed only at the front, and imagine this was an Omni mic, yeah. Now, this guy doesn't really care where the sound source is, because really all it cares about is there going to be any change, any deviation in the normal pressure of the medium of air. Yeah? So if the pressure goes higher, the diaphragm goes in, you have signal. The pressure goes lower, the diaphragm is sucked out, so to speak, you get, signal. And so all it really cares is there a change in the pressure there? What's going on? Yeah. Change in the pressure signal, fine. But a mic like this one, and think about old school ribbon mics. Yeah. Well, this is a dual diaphragm mic, but imagine that was a ribbon mic with a single ribbon inside, so one diaphragm, yeah? Well, it's exposed on the front and the back. And so if I poke it here, if I push it on this side, it's going to move in that direction, and okay, maybe I'll get signal. If I push it on this side, I'll get signal, but it's going to be opposite in phase. So if I push it on that side, imagine the waveform may look like this. I've pushed it on that side, it looks like that. Now, what is going to happen if I actually speak on this side, and then not on that side, not on this side, from here? Well, imagine I'm pushing it equally on the front and the back. No sound. And no sound, yeah? Because really what a figure of 8 mic wants to see, if you want to get high signal, is a difference between the front and the back. That's what it cares about. Is there a difference between this and that? Oh, there is a big difference? Excellent. I give you a lot of signal. There's no difference? I speak from here, I'm pushing on both sides, no signal. Now, if this were my snare, and the snare is here, I'm putting it right like that. Here's the top skin, here's the bottom skin. Now, this is going to pick the signal in phase like that. And the bottom of the snare, when you put a top and bottom mics, you have to flip the phase, right? Because they're out of phase, because, they're moving like that. So if this one is, the skin is going down on the top, for the bottom mic, the skin is going sort of the opposite direction, right? Do you know what I mean? Like, skin on the bottom is getting close, but on the top is going further away. Yeah? Well, now, that, if I set it to figure of 8, it's picking the signal in phase from the top. The bottom is out of phase, but the bottom is also out of phase compared to the top. And out of phase with out of phase creates in phase. So the result of putting it there is actually that you pick both the top and the bottom of the snare drum with a single mic. And this works really well for toms. I cannot tell you how good this sounds on toms. And the cool thing is, well, if this is my tom and I put that mic that way and I have a guitar cabinet over there, well, the figure of 8 doesn't hear much on the sides. And, well, what happens? I reject the spill. So it's actually a very good technique. And, okay, I spoke enough. Let's hear it. Let's play that. And what I'll do is I'll just change the polar pattern. So I'll just put a loop and I'm going to change the polar pattern. I want you to tell me, well, don't tell me anything. I'm just going to judge it by looking at your eyes and your faces, because it's shocking. It's not even funny. It's a bit ridiculous, I'd say. Okay, so I'm going to play something now. Okay, so I think you kind of get the idea here, and how much you can achieve with the polar pattern by selecting the correct polar pattern and knowing how to use your polar patterns. Yeah, and the best thing is here, I could even automate this inside my DAW. And this is what I was telling the guys before. Imagine that you record vocals with this one, and you record it in this space here, where you have this nice ambience. and now you want to record back in vocals for something, for whatever reason, and then what you can do is you place it a bit further away, so you pick not just the voice but also the ambience here, and then you can automate it, and you can start, let's say, in Omni, where the mic, the sound is right there in the mix, and then you go towards hypercardioid, and all of a sudden it just does that and gets closer to you. So you can actually use it as a creative tool. Yeah, it's very cool. I'm going to change now. I'm going to play you first this one in figure of 8, and then I'm going to change it to a ribbon emulation. But for this one, I'm going to bring the speakers down by quite a bit because I know what's going to happen. Ribbon mics generally have crazy proximity effect, and therefore they boost the low end big time. Yeah. And in fact, this is one of the things about this mic placement, is that you're not only recording the snare, but you're also picking the kick really nicely. And because you're in figure of 8, you have the most proximity, like the strongest proximity effect. I don't know if you're aware about that, but omnidirectional mics don't have proximity effect. Bidirectional mics have the strongest proximity effect. And proximity effect means two things. If you're close to the sound source, you boost the low end. If you're far from the sound source, you lose the low end. Yeah, they start sounding skinny. They don't have any low end. Yeah. So what I'll do here is I'm going to go from one, like the normal emulation, to a ribbon emulation, and the difference it's scary. Yeah. And the cool thing is, I personally wouldn't put that ribbon right there because I don't think it's going to be good for the ribbon element inside. You're probably going to stretch it. Yeah, it's not meant to handle such high SPL, and it's not meant to be put that close to drums. Yeah, let's have a listen to that. And he thought that the first one sounded good, and then that thing came in, and it's too much, right? It's quite a lot, I have to say. It's a bit, but the funny thing is that actually for the mix with Cameron Craig, we used a 4038 emulation for the kick, because in the mix it sounded pretty good. Yeah.
Does it change the transient response of the signal as well?
Yes, it would. Yeah. So. Talking about talking about the mics, from what I understand, I should be, finishing with this. I'm just going to very briefly explain which mic is which. So these are the small ones. They're made to handle high SPL. They're meant to handle, very high SPL. You can easily put that mic inside a kick drum, in front of a guitar cabinet. No issue whatsoever. You can put it, I don't know, in front of a jet engine. Well, I don't know. That case, it might overload if it's like 150, 60 dB, but that's probably a bit extreme. So these one and the Edge Solo, they are fixed to cardioid polar patterns. They don't do anything else but cardioid because, well, they are cardioid mics, so they cannot emulate an omnidirectional mic. It's not going to work. Yeah, this is really nice because it's very small, very compact. It's actually very easy to position. It's a good mic. For the mix that I played you, the rock track, that was used on vocals. Yeah, that was the mic we used on vocals. Obviously, as a large diaphragm mic, it would sound different. The small one will be more accurate. This one will have a little bit more meat, so to speak. So it really depends what is it that you're after. Then we have the duo output, which is the duo with now the ability to vary the polar pattern and also model, you know, omnidirectional, figure-of-8 mics, and so on. And it does model also the off-axis response, from what I know. And then we've got the 5-pin stereo mic, which we're going to use on acoustic guitar in a second. This one allows for XY with cardioids. It allows for Bloom line. It allows for mid-side. And a funny discovery is that it actually sometimes sounds really good in XY in something between Omni and cardioid, yeah? And this is the Edge Go, which I said that it's bus-powered USB-C mic. I connected it to my Mac here, and it was saying like a few hours of battery life while using it. So you could actually use that on the go. It comes in with this software where you can select the same kind of FPGA effects, reverb, and the different models, and you can actually also record both the processed and the unprocessed signal. And it does have a mini jack output with a really, really high volume, high quality headphone amplifier built into it, and same kind of quality converters as the other interfaces have. And it does come even with a desk stand, a pop shield, and a really cool shock mount. So it's a very cool thing if you want to take it on the road. And okay, I have to finish. That's just Michael Brower's setup with 5 Orion 32s and a bunch of other things. I mean, this setup is ridiculous. And 5 times 32, you can calculate how many inputs and outputs he's got in his studio. And that's this part of the session. I think they're relieved that I'm finishing. We're going to move now to this, because I'm sure the musicians are already starving and waiting, you know, to be recorded. So do you guys have any questions? Anything I can answer before we move to that part of the show? Mm-hmm.
In the rock mix, which effect there is in the vocal?
The vocal mic, oh, it has lots of effects. I can actually, well, I should check with my colleague because he would know exactly the number of it. But it has lots of them. So it has EQs. It has even, so EQs, compressors, reverb, and also de-esser, which is very useful, I think, for, you know, when you work with vocals. Because you know, you de-ess the signal and then you boost the top end with an EQ. Really nice, yeah.
Because there is like a megaphone effect.
Oh, a megaphone effect.
Yeah.
Ooh, I'm not sure, but oh yeah, you can distort. Yes, you can. Yeah, you have the pre's. You can distort. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, you can get plenty of distortion. I don't know if they've included the guitar amps. If they haven't, I should tell them to include the guitar amps, and maybe also within the mic models to sample like a really old, you know, like this kind of.
I used to like send the audio, the vocal audio to like guitar amps, and it sounds like.
It can be really cool. I do this all the time. Well, all the time, but yeah, I love sending. Well, he would tell you because, you know, I used to lecture him, and actually one of the things that I would always, let's send the drums to this guitar amp. Let's, you know, just
ways to distort an SSL.
Yeah. Or turn the SSL into a oscillator and just, you know, make it go crazy. Feedback all 32 channels, and you know, you can turn a console into an analog synth. Yeah, you just feedback every channel and then you EQ it to EQ the feedback to. Anyway, we're getting lost. Yeah, hello?
Nick, I couldn't see the photographs. I was in the control room. How did you place the microphone on the toms? I couldn't see how you did.
Yeah, actually, very straightforward way of placing the mics. What I like to do with toms. So, I mean, it doesn't really look that way here. Actually, this doesn't really look correct. It did sound good. I usually place them, but it doesn't look like that. I don't know. I think it's the picture is a bit misleading because they were about this far from the skin at least. And I actually really like the duo on toms because when you place it in figure of 8, you can actually have it a bit further up and put the no side, you know, the side that doesn't pick sound. Well, it does pick, but it doesn't pick that much sound. You can aim that at the cymbals. Yeah, and then actually when you're a bit further away from the tom, I find it that there's a bit more low end, a bit more, just the sound blooms. It's not that really closed. I don't, generally I like moving the mics a bit further away from the source in general. Not always. There's no rules, obviously. Rules should be broken in audio, if you know them. It's good to know them. Anything else that I can answer? Okay, well, in such case, I think that it's time to present our lovely musicians, Kenna and Cox. They're here, well, they live in Paris, but they're originally from Australia. They're going to perform for us. So the idea here is this. We placed roughly where we think the mics will sound all right. Yeah, will sound good, but we're not sure. Yeah, and well, let's see if this is going to work well. But you know, one of the assistants will be here, or maybe two of them, and we have headphones so we can talk to them. So while they play, we would like to move the mics and have a listen. And so I'm not really completely sure which ones we want to start with, but maybe these ones for the violin. And so I think, you know, really, what I hate doing is just put the mic where it looks good. Because how do you know? And then mics are not like, so how do you place a mic? Well, you can walk around and you can listen with your ears. Fantastic. Yeah, that's a very good start. So you get an idea of the room, get an idea of the instrument. But the microphone is not your ears. Right? Your brain does a lot of calculations. In fact, it lies to you all the time. In fact, if you see something, it can actually correct your hearing and change your perception because, you know, it constructs reality, sort of hallucinates reality for you. And, you know, it constantly actually adjusts your senses. So the microphone is not your ears. It's good to listen to it, the instruments, with your ears, but then you gotta place that mic somewhere. And then, depending on the polar pattern, that placement will change. So the idea here is this. These ones, we're not quite sure what we're going to do with them yet, all right, to be honest. But these ones here are quite obvious. Because we're going to have, you know, both the guitar and voice to record, the idea is if we have the guitar here, and if we could angle this mic a little so that in figure of 8, the top points at the mouth. It's a classic trick that you may read in, like, you'll find it in magazines and stuff like that. If you put it in figure of 8, and in this case we'll put it in bloom lines, so 2 figure of 8s crossed, yeah? The top of the mic should kind of aim at his mouth, so it doesn't pick the voice as much. And the bottom of the vocal mic should aim at the guitar, if possible, so that it actually rejects the guitar sound. So then actually on the faders there, we could say, well, we want to bring up a little bit the voice, and it's not going to be the case that when you bring up the voice, you bring the guitar up. Yeah. And these ones really, are they going to sound good here? I don't know. I have this chair actually. It may look funny, but you know, I like to actually listen to the musicians like that, and then actually do this as well, and just hear it with my, you know, with my ears, and just see how it changes, because you want to find a good spot where the mix is already there in these guys. You don't want the violin to be much louder than everything else, or the other way around. Yeah. So ideally, we'd just place them somewhere where there is a decent balance. Yeah. So I think, let me just double check with my colleagues, but I think I should invite you there, or maybe invite half of you. Let me just double check if there's enough. No? They're saying no? I thought that was the idea. Okay. Let me just consult them very briefly. Yeah. Aha, to zapiszemy.
I'll put it back. Do you want to see? Wait a second.
Right, so here's what's going on. Because apparently I like to talk a lot, and I've been talking for a bit longer than I should. What we'll do is that we will, well, I'll just do what I said that I am not going to do. I'm just going to have a quick listen and I'll actually check the sound over there, but they actually want us to record already. Because they say that it sounds really good there. I haven't heard it yet. And so then we record a few tracks, and then after we do the recording, we're going to go there and have a listen, if that's okay. Yeah? Okay. Let me just check with them and see what's going on, and I'll let you know. But I think that's what's going to happen. All right, guys. So if you want to go there, you're all invited in the control room. We're just not going to move the mics because they sound good. That's what I thought. So you're all invited to the control room. And after that, after you finish there, you're invited to have a drink. Yeah? But not in the control room.
This big old house is as empty as a dried up well, but each room's got a story she can't tell. Well, I see a face, I hear your name, dancing like a naked flame. Burnout stones in your fireplace are cold. I go walking through your body like a dream. I see everything the way that it used to be. It's all over now. Have gone. It's nothing but an empty home, a lifetime full of faded memory. Oh, broken windows and dust on a shelf of just tiny little pieces of myself. Better off now to turn and walk away. Walk away, baby. Garden are all gone, and the mailbox is standing all alone. There's no letters now, no telephone calls, laughter in between these walls. Big old house is sleeping all alone. There's no letters now, no telephone calls, laughter in between these walls. Big old house is sleeping all alone. Yes, this big old My fishing boat's got a hole in it, but that don't bother me. I'm gonna drown out there in that deep blue sea. Car broke down by the side of the road, I busted and I'm all alone. It don't bother me, it don't bother me, 'cause I'm happy. Yes, I'm happy. Oh, I'm happy as a boy can be. Well, my old tin shack got a hole in the roof, but that don't bother me, 'cause when it rains, it's just gonna wash me clean. Light my fire every night, eat my fish by candlelight. It don't bother me, it don't bother me, 'cause I'm happy. Yes, I'm happy. Whoa, I'm happy as a boy can be. Fishing boat's got a hole in it, but that don't bother me. I'm gonna drown out there in that deep blue sea. Car broke down by the side of the road, I'm busted and I'm all alone. It don't bother me, it don't bother me, 'cause I'm happy. Yes, I'm happy. Whoa, I'm happy as a boy can be. Happy. Take my hand and walk me through the past. It's hard to say how long it's gonna last. You draw a line in the sand, you know your hand is shaking. But I lose track when I count all the pills I'm taking. Now, but I feel the need to cry. Hard to understand the reason why. You take another hit and make it go away. Tell another lie, make it through the day. It's so easy to get, so hard to let go. You're at the point of no return before you know that losing hand you're holding, where you know you should be folding. You take the money in both hands and walk away. what you're seeing. Bloodshot eyes and a heart that's barely beating. Feel the water running through your hands. Ice cold water feels like burning sand. Feel the water running through your hands. Ice cold water feels like burning sand. 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 Caravan is on the road. Gonna help me with my heavy load. And there's always one more town you got to play. Back it up, shut it down, move it on to another town, far, far away. Same old show every night, but lately it ain't feeling right. It seems like this job is gonna put me in my grave. Security is locked the door. They won't let me play anymore. And there's an old black man sweeping up the floor like yesterday. Same old show every night, but lately it ain't feeling right. It seems like this job is gonna put me in my grave. like the door. It won't let me play anymore. And there's an old black man sweeping up the floor, just like yesterday.
Is that it?
Drive to Adelaide in the pouring rain. Good to see those lights again. You said all night long, a motel room with a view. On your way to Never Never Land, just to touch that desert sand. No one knows the reason why you do. You broke anchor in the night, slipped away without a fight. Never know how far you go without her. Wedding ring in a rubber spin, pack your bags and walk away. Did she ever love? Make your way from Hargrave Street to the icebergs for a treat. Watch the rider carving up the waves on long. Neon sign, red and blue, from the junction on a new road I used to take to get back home. You broke anchor in the night, slipped away without a fight. Never know how far you go without her. Wedding ring in a rubber spin, pack your bags and walk away. Will she ever love? Can never return here. You broke anchor in the night, slipped away without a fight. Never know how far you go without her. Throw your wedding ring in a rubber spin, pack your bags and walk away. Will she ever love? Can never return here. I think that's enough, is it?
I think so.
What's the
Ça
question?
suffit?
Finished? Do you want one more? Are we done, or you want one more song? We're done, are we? One more. You want one more? Okay.
One last and beautiful song, please.
What are you gonna do?
Love is up, love is down. Your love turning, baby, turn around, around. Your love is easy, my love is hard. Your love is lightning, baby, my love is dawn. And I'm almost home. I'm almost home. Love is black, love is white. Sometimes daytime, baby, sometimes it's night. Your love is fast, faster than a Tuscan fire. Your love is lifting me, baby, higher and higher. And I'm almost home. I'm almost home. Thank you, baby. Driving home around 2:30, don't know what I'm gonna say to you. I'm a little bit drunk, a little bit stoned, but I'm almost home. Driving home around 2:30, don't know what I'm gonna say to you. A little bit drunk, a little bit stoned, but I'm almost home. Hit the gas, baby. I'm almost home. Almost home. I'm almost home. Almost home.
Chris Kenna.
Woo!
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nick.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
This was great. Thanks. Well, I think we should close and just thank the wonderful musicians, and also say thanks to Abbey Road Institute Paris for organizing this. And well, that's it. I hope you enjoyed that, and that was interesting.
Yeah, thank you.
Cheers. Thank you.